Hey guys, Mitch from Rolling Garage here. We get a lot of customers asking us, how do I rebuild my shocks? Or what's the best way to build my shocks? Or they'll come in with their car and their shocks won't perform properly and they'll go, well, I just rebuilt my shocks. They should be fine. But when I take them off the car and test them, there's no rebound in them or they feel really seized up. Rebound meaning when you press the shock shaft into the shock and then let go of it, it comes back out. Now, there's no definitive right or wrong way to build a shock, and how you build them to perform is up to your personal preference. A lot of guys coming from the 10 scale buggy racing world into the RC drifting world will build their shocks with no rebound in them or even negative rebound because that's what they've done for their buggy. I'm not sure the advantages or disadvantages of that. Maybe one of you buggy guys can chime in the comments and school me on that tuning aspect from the racing world. But at least for drifting, I tend to build my shocks with full rebound in them. So today, I'm going to be showing you guys the one right way I've been taught how to build these shocks for drifting. And aspects of this specific build method were taught to us by GGT. Shout out to Keith at RC GGT in Garden Grove, California. Definitely go check him out if you're near Disneyland in the SoCal area. So let's get started. So I have my shock off the car now. I have some paper towels, a pair of shock pliers, and something to dump the old oil in. So now we'll start the disassembly of the shock. The first thing I'm going to do is just clean the shock off as much as I can. I like to start off with as clean of parts as I can. It makes the reassembly a little less messy. I mean, the whole rebuild can be a bit messy of a job anyways, but it's even worse when you have to deal with oil on top of all this caked on dirt. So I just wipe the shock off as much as I can. Get all this old dirt and oil off, and you don't want any of this stuff to get inside the new oil either, so you might as well try to get as much as you can off while the shock is still closed up. You can use a cleaner or a degreaser, but I'm just going to wipe it clean as much as I can. So now that's all cleaned up, I'm going to remove the spring and the spring retainer. Put that to the side. Once that's off, I'm going to screw this preload collar all the way up so that, again, I can clean all the dirt off the shock body threads, keep everything nice and clean. Once the strip shock is nice and cleaned off, I'm going to grab my shock pliers here. And if you don't have a set of these, I would highly recommend a pair of these if you're going to be rebuilding your shocks as often as you should be. But if not, you can use a set of cutters right here on the start of the threads. Or if not, use a pair of pliers with a towel wrapped around the shock shaft here. But be very careful because I have messed up some of my shock shafts before doing it that way. So I would highly recommend a good pair of shock pliers available on our website. So I'm going to use my pliers on the shaft here to get this lower ball cup off. Once that's off, I can crack this top cap open. Take the aluminum cap and the plastic cap off, put that to the side. I can take the diaphragm off and then just dry this off. Usually you won't have to replace this every single time, but if you start to see a divot forming in the middle of yours right here, then it might be time to replace them. Now I can pour all the old oil out. After all the oil is out, we can slide the piston shaft out of the shock body. I clean this off as much as I can so that any dirt or contaminants left on it from the old oil doesn't get into the new oil when we put it back in. And place that to the side. Then unscrew the bottom cap. Remove the old O-ring and toss that though. We'll be replacing those every single time. The Yokomo big bores will usually only have this collar that goes right underneath the aluminum cap, but I'm running the top line +1mm dampers on my MC1, which are a copy of Tamiya TRS, so I have this extra little spacer that goes with them. Make sure you don't lose any of these. Then just like before, I wipe all the parts clean, especially the inside of the shock body. If you're changing oil weights, You don't want any of the old weight oil to mix in with your new weight oil that you're trying. Keep everything as consistent as possible. And with that said, I'm only showing you on one shock today, but you might want to disassemble all of your shocks first. Get all your parts clean, ready to go back together again. At least the fronts together or the rears together first. That way, when you assemble everything, you can assemble everything like an assembly line. Might make for more consistent shocks corner to corner. So I'll get the inside of this cleaned, and then don't forget where the O-ring sits to get that kind of wiped out. And now that all of our parts are clean, we're ready to put it all back together again. So for those of you with a fresh build on your hands, I've taken my whole setup completely apart here to show you guys what I do when I build a brand new set of shocks. If you're just rebuilding, you can skip ahead, but you might learn some tips or tricks that you didn't know before if you watch this part. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab a little shock oil here, and we're going to oil this collar O-ring up. I see some people forget to oil this or forget it completely, and their collars are really hard to adjust, or they just free spin. You might lose your preload settings as you're driving, so this ensures that it's easy to adjust and it keeps your preload settings locked in. So once this is all oiled up, we're going to slip it inside the groove inside this collar. So now I'm going to oil the shock body up a bit, and then we'll start screwing this collar on. Once that's all the way on, one trick I have is to take a paint marker if you have one and mark this notch right here on the collar. You can find that mark on almost any preload collar, and this is to help you count the number of turns that you have on your spring preload. That way you can adjust the other side the equal amount of turns, or not. That's actually how you adjust your ride height to be even on both sides due to weight distribution or to corner balance your car. So now I'm going to assemble the piston and the shaft. If you have the Yokomo tapered pistons, you're going to want to put the E-ring, that's these parts right here, on the taper side first. I usually do taper down for fronts and taper up for rears. That way the front droops faster and the rear squats faster under acceleration. But on these shocks, I use top line 8-hole pistons for TRFs. We have these on our site too. And they have a very small taper on one side, so I do the same for these, but they don't require the E-ring to be put on one side first, so I can put whichever side I want on first. Now I have this top line E-ring setter with me. This is part number TP-250 on our website. This is really helpful for getting these tiny E-rings snapped on the shaft, and I have a magnet stuck onto it, which helps if it slips off the ring, and during assembly of the pistons, the E-ring doesn't go flying away. If it does, the shock shafts or the pistons will usually come with extra because they know this can happen, or we have spares, and that's top line part number TP-76. So to get this first E-ring on, I actually don't even use the setter. I just place the ring in the groove, and then I'll press down on a hard surface. You'll feel it click in, and then just make sure that it seats all the way inside the groove, and you're ready to slip the piston on. If you have Yokomo tapered pistons, you'll put the E-ring again on whichever side you want the tapered side on first, so that the E-ring slips into the groove on that tapered side. Now the second E-ring is really where the E-ring setter tool comes in handy. Just like the first ring, I'll slip the second one into the groove, and then I'll face this open end of the tool on top of the E-ring, and then just push the E-ring in, and you should hear it click and seat into the groove. Now our piston and shaft assembly is ready to go, and we're ready to start putting the shock back together. So now I'm ready to assemble the shock with new seals. Today I'm using a set of these Rev D O-rings, part number RD015RS, available at our website www.rollinggaragerc.com. So I'll go ahead and get one of these O-rings out. Then I'll get some of this green slime on it, and this is Team Associated part number 1105. One of these things by yourself will last you almost a lifetime of building shocks. Definitely a key part of my shock builds, and this helps coat the O-rings in a protective barrier that will help keep them from absorbing the silicone oil and swelling up. If you've ever pressed on your shocks and they feel really stiff even though you use a pretty lightweight oil, it might be because your O-rings are swelled up and it's time to replace them. Now I'm only doing one shock for you guys today, but I used to put all 4 O-rings in a bag of slime together, but I had heard something that leaving slime prolonged on the O-rings was actually bad for them, so now I just do them one at a time and fill the shocks up with oil immediately after. Let me know in the comments if any of you know any factual truth to that. So once I have this O-ring slimed up, I'll slide it into the shock body. Now I'll get the O-ring collar and put it into the aluminum cap. And since I have essentially the Tamiya TRFs, I have this extra spacer that goes in on top of the O-ring. And then I'll go ahead and screw the cap on just a bit to hold it on the shock. And this is where I feel like this method of shock build differentiates itself from just throwing everything together and calling it a day. It's a bit more meticulous, but I think it really results in a much better performing shock. And if you haven't ever built your shocks like this before, I think you'll notice a night and day difference in performance in your car after finishing a set of shocks like this. So with the cap on like this just a slight bit, I'm going to stick the piston and shaft assembly through and pull it out through the bottom. Now we're going to go up and down with the shaft while spinning it, and we're going to do that a few times and then screw the cap down just a bit, and again up and down and spin, and we're going to repeat this until you get the cap snug down. And what this is going to do is it's going to center the O-ring inside the shock body. I've seen brand new shock builds where the shaft is still really stiff, and it's probably from just throwing everything together and screwing the cap down, causing the O-ring to sit off-center and possibly get squished or pinched as you're screwing the cap down, making it bind with the shock shaft. So once you have the cap screwed all the way down, it's ready to fill up with oil. I'm using some Yokomo Silicone 250 CST today, and I usually go to right about here first. If you guys can see that. And now you need to bleed all the air out. So we'll go up and down gently with the shaft, making sure you don't accidentally press the threads all the way up inside. And you can also twist and spin, kind of how we put it through earlier. And this can help get small air bubbles that are stuck out from under the piston. With really light oil, like 50 CST, you can almost instantly bleed them. Almost no air stays in the 50 oil once you give it a few pumps. Now, if you don't have one of these nice Tamiya air pumps, or if you're using something like the Axon RevoShock 2, where you shouldn't use one of these according to the directions, this is part number TAM 54152. We also have these available. And don't we just have everything, guys? You can just leave your shocks sitting for a while if you don't have one of these until you can't see any of the bigger air bubbles. And then if you have small air bubbles lingering at the top, just try giving it a soft blow on the top, and that should pop any of the small bubbles that tend to sit at the very top but don't pop. So I'm going to put this in my shock air pump, and I'm going to give this about 3 pumps, just a very light vacuum to get the air bubbles out on top. And then we'll come back in a bit and check on this. Alright, so it's been a few minutes. We're going to release the pressure on this vacuum. And it looks like all the air has been bled out. You can give it a few pumps to recheck and make sure if you want. Now I'm just going to top the shock off with oil again. right to about there. Pretty full, but not like on the edge of overflowing, or you'll end up with a super stiff shock with barely any travel once you put together and try to push the shaft in. So now I'm going to grab my diaphragm, and this is probably one of the last parts of assembly that people can get wrong that really affects the performance of the shock. You just spent all that time bleeding the shock and getting all that air out, so we don't want to introduce any more air once the cap goes on. So I'm going to take the diaphragm, I'm going to start on one side of the oil, dipping it in a bit, and then just slide it to the other side. After it's fully in the oil, I'll press down a bit on the center. It's okay if some oil comes out, that just means there's not going to be any air trapped inside. Now I'll take the plastic cap, put that on top first, then put the aluminum cap over that, and screw it down. After you snug that down, grab a towel and wipe the shock off. You don't want to put it back on the car wet with oil, or it'll attract dirt that will stick on the shock and it'll end up staying there. See that? This is a nice rebound that I look for when I finish assembling my shocks. The rebound speed will depend on the weight of the oil and the type of piston you decide to use, but one important thing to look at would be to make sure your rebound speed is relatively the same between at least the two fronts compared to each other and the two rears compared to each other. If the rebound is different side to side, one shock might have more or less oil in it, or you might still have some air trapped in it, so you might want to open that shock up and try again. Now on the big bores, you'll see a notch cut into the shock body about right here. These top line dampers don't have that, but I'll usually twist this plastic cap until it's in line with that notch. That way it's easy to count the number of preload turns on your collar once the shocks are back on the car. For my shock, I'm just going to turn the preload collar all the way up, and then I'll match the hole in the top to the notch of my collar, like so. Excuse the bit of wiring mess. I would usually have my cars a bit cleaner than this, but I'm waiting for a fan adapter for my AccuVance fans so I can run them to this neat little Futaba power switch we have now. Shout out to Mike Dow of Limited Traction for showing me this. So once I get the adapter in, I'll run my fans to this wireless switch so I can shut them off when I don't need them. But for now, I'm too lazy to take it off my chassis, so I just have the wire wrapped around it because I actually got this caught under my car during practice at Super G finals, and this plug right here broke off. It's fixed now, but back to the shocks anyways. The last step is to screw the ball cup back onto the bottom of this shaft. Now, just like with my alignments, I usually eyeball where this needs to be first and then micrometer the other side to match. So for the fronts, I usually eyeball it out to match the suspension at pretty much full droop, kind of like this. That way the shock can have travel to full droop in the front suspension if it needs to, but you can do a bit less if you want. The front might not even ever hit full droop anyways, depending on your chassis and motor ESC setup, even under full throttle. The rear though, I'll measure up to like half a full droop because I don't think my car will ever get near full droop, kind of like this, even under full braking. So I'll hold the chassis about where it would sit static with the battery and the body on, maybe about here, and then droop it just a little bit, and then measure the ball cup to there. After you decide where your ball cup needs to be, go ahead, take a micrometer and measure this side out so you can match the other side up. Micrometer is another super important tool to have in the RC drift game, whether it's building a chassis kit or measuring out suspension links. And I know what you're thinking, oh, here he goes again, he's going to tell us that they have this in their shop too. Well, you're right. Be sure to look up our 6-inch 150mm LCD digital vernier caliper micrometer available on our website www.rollinggaragerc.com. This is the last shameless plug for this video, I promise. So after that's done, put your spring and your retainer back on. And my last trick for this video is snapping these tough ball cups back on. So take your shock pliers, and this might work best with this crab cracker style plier. That's what Carl calls them. And then I use the handle to snap the tops and bottoms on if I can get it back on. No more broken fingers, right? So that about wraps it up for this video. This is the first time I've ever done something like this, but I felt like it was much needed to help our customers get their cars set up properly, so any feedback on anything I might have missed is great. I have a couple other topics and tricks that I could get into on another video to help you guys out, like painting bodies, applying decals and such. I know our 2022 RG livery is probably a bit of a pain to put on with all the lightning, but I had a technique I learned from Mishima-san from Yokomo that I use for my Addiction S15 that made it fairly easy to put on, so maybe I could show you guys that in another video. Anyways, if you guys have any topics you think might be good for a how-to video, or if this video helped you, drop a comment below and I might do it. Like and share this video, and be sure to follow our Instagram page at Rolling Garage. Man, I said that micrometer thing was going to be my last plug of this video. Alright, last plug for sure. Until the next video where I can plug our business more, bye for now.